One ordinary afternoon, I heard the front door swing open, and there she was, my mother, standing in my living room like she owned the place. Her sharp eyes scanned the space, evaluating it as if she were inspecting a luxury suite. Then, without hesitation, she dropped a bombshell: "Since you have a spare room, I'm moving in." I laughed hard. Surely, she was joking. But as I met her unflinching gaze, the amusement drained from my face. She wasn't kidding. My mother had never been the warm, nurturing type. In fact, growing up, she made it painfully clear that she never truly wanted kids. My sister and I were obligations, not blessings. As soon as we could fend for ourselves, she made sure we understood just how inconvenient we were. At 16, I had a job. At 17, I was paying rent just to live under her roof. By 18, she had washed her hands of me completely, kicking me out without hesitation, reminding me that her house wasn't a charity. I had no choice but to survive. I worked, clawed my way through college with scholarships, and built a stable, peaceful life. For the first time, I had a home that felt like mine: no shouting, no manipulation, no walking on eggshells. Just peace. And now, she was here, expecting to claim a space in the life she had discarded me from years ago. I shook my head. "That's not happening." She scoffed. "Of course it is. You're my daughter, you owe me." But she was wrong. I didn't owe her a damn thing. A week passed, and I thought the storm had blown over. I had made myself clear: she wasn't moving in. End of story. Or so I thought. That morning, the distant rumbling of a truck made me glance out the window. My stomach dropped. A moving truck was pulling into my driveway. My mother stood beside it, arms crossed, barking orders at the movers like a queen surveying her kingdom. I blinked, trying to process what I was seeing. Surely, this wasn't real. Then I saw them. The movers were unloading furniture, a couch, boxes, and even a freaking bed frame. She wasn't just moving in a few things. She was moving in everything. Adrenaline surged through me as I threw the front door open and marched outside. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She turned, unfazed, and gave me a look like I was the one being unreasonable. "Moving in. What does it look like?" I laughed, loud, incredulous. Surely, she was joking. Surely, no one could be this delusional. But the movers kept working, hauling her things toward my house as if this had already been decided. I stepped in front of the door, planting myself firmly between her and my home. "No. You are not moving in." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, don't be dramatic. I'm your mother. Of course, I'm moving in." That's when my husband, who had been watching from the porch, finally stepped forward. He walked up beside me, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But when he spoke, his voice was like ice. "Take your things and get off our property. Now." For the first time, my mother faltered. She had spent her life steamrolling over people, bending them to her will. But my husband wasn't budging. Her face twisted in rage. "Excuse me?" He didn't flinch. "You heard me." And then she screamed. Right there in the driveway, in front of the neighbors, in front of the movers. A full-blown, high-pitched, rage-filled tantrum. "You can't do this to me. This is my right. You owe me." She spun to me, face red, eyes wild. "Are you really going to let him talk to me like this? I raised you. I fed you. I put a roof over your head." I met her glare, my blood boiling. "You kicked me out at 18. She waved a hand dismissively. "You were an adult." I exhaled sharply, jaw clenched. "So are you." The realization hit her like a slap. She opened her mouth, but my husband cut her off. "You have 5 minutes to leave, or I'm calling the police." Silence. Then, with one final glare, she spun on her heel, stomped to her car, and peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching. But I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone was vibrating nonstop, 27 missed calls flashing across the screen, my sister, my aunt, even a few cousins. And then the texts. How could you throw your own mother out on the street? You're a terrible daughter. She sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay her? She's your mother. What kind of monster are you? My stomach twisted. What the hell was she telling them? Before I could even process it, my phone rang again. My sister. I sighed, already bracing myself, and picked up. What did you do? She yelled before I could even say hello. I frowned. What are you talking about? Mom told everyone you threw her out with nowhere to go. That she begged for help because her landlord evicted her, and you and your controlling husband kicked her onto the street. I nearly dropped the phone. That is not what happened. I know that, my sister snapped, but half the family thinks you're the devil now. My jaw clenched. Of course. Of course, she was playing the victim. Twisting reality, making herself look innocent while turning me into the villain. She had done this my whole life. And, as always, it was working. Relatives blocked me, unfriended me on social media. Even some of my coworkers started acting weird. My gut churned. Something wasn't right. Then, I found out why. A concerned friend from work pulled me aside. Your mother called the office. My blood turned to ice. She what? She called HR, said she was your mother, that she was homeless, and that you abandoned her. She told them she was worried about your moral character and wanted to warn them about what kind of person you were. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just a family fight anymore. This was character assassination. I sat on the couch, my hands trembling. My husband sat beside me, silent for a long moment. Then, finally, he asked, "What do you want to do?" And that's when it hit me. My whole life, I had been reacting to her. She would do something awful, and I would deal with it. Not this time. This time I was making the first move. And she wouldn't see it coming. I knew my mother wouldn't stop. She never did. And sure enough, the next few days proved me right. It started with a notice from my bank. Someone had attempted to access my account using my maiden name and old security questions. Questions only she would know. Then, an email from my insurance company. Someone had tried to add themselves as a dependent under my policy. And then the final straw, a fake welfare claim filed under my name, accusing me of elder abuse and financial neglect. My mother wasn't just smearing my reputation anymore. She was trying to destroy my life. But I didn't panic. If she wanted to play dirty, I would play smarter. I locked down everything. Froze my credit. Changed every password. Set up two-factor authentication on all my accounts. Then, I called my lawyer. And then, I went digging. Because my mother had secrets, big ones. And I was about to expose them all. The first call I made was to an old family friend. What she told me made my jaw drop. My mother hadn't just been evicted, she had been blacklisted from renting. Turns out, she had been illegally renting out her apartment on Airbnb behind her landlord's back, making thousands while pretending to still live there. When she got caught, she claimed he was scamming her. It didn't work. But it got worse. She had stolen thousands from my elderly grandmother before she passed away. Money meant for medical bills, money meant to keep my grandmother alive, was spent on vacations, shopping sprees, and gambling. That's why most of the family barely spoke to her. She was a fraud. A liar. A thief. And now, I had proof. I waited for her next move. And, like clockwork, she made it. She called my lawyer, demanding financial support as my mother, claiming I had a legal obligation to house her. My lawyer shut her down so fast it must have made her head spin. But I wasn't done. I gathered every piece of evidence I had, the eviction, the fraud, the stolen money, and sent it to the entire family. Then, I took it one step further. I sent it to her landlord. To the bank she owed money to. And finally, to the police. Because some of what she did? It wasn't just immoral. It was illegal. The fallout was instantaneous. The moment my messages went out, my phone exploded with notifications, family group chats going silent, once accusing relatives scrambling to backtrack, some even apologizing. The same people who had called me a monster, who had condemned me for abandoning my mother, now saw the truth. And they wanted nothing to do with her. Her landlord? Suing her for fraud. The bank? Opening an investigation into her unpaid debts. The police? Very, very interested in the money she had stolen from my grandmother. I thought she would fight back, try to twist the truth like she always did. But I underestimated just how fast people abandon a sinking ship. She called my sister, my aunt, even distant cousins, begging them to believe her, to take her side. Nobody did. Then, in a final, desperate move, she went to Aunt Maria, the only person who had taken her in after I threw her off my property. It didn't go as planned. Because Aunt Maria had learned the truth, too. And the moment she realized my mother had been sneaking into her purse, stealing money, she snapped. She threw my mother's bags onto the front lawn and slammed the door in her face. And just like that, she was homeless. No money. No friends. No family left to manipulate. She had burned every bridge she ever had. But karma wasn't finished with her yet. A few weeks later, I got a phone call. It was a detective. Turns out, my mother had outstanding warrants, old fraud cases, bad checks, even identity theft. She had been pulling scams for years, and now, with the evidence I had provided, the police had enough to arrest her. The last thing I heard, she was picked up at a gas station. I stared at the message from a cousin, just one sentence. Your mom just got arrested. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. The aftermath was everything I had hoped for, and more. For the first time in my life, I was free. No more walking on eggshells, no more waiting for the next disaster, no more being haunted by the woman who had tormented me since childhood. My home was mine, my life was mine, and she could no longer touch me. As for my mother? She lost everything. With nowhere to go, she bounced between cheap motels, burning through whatever little money she had left. She called distant family members, begging for help, but no one wanted to get involved. They knew the truth now. She had scammed too many people, stolen too much, told too many lies. I imagined her sitting alone in a dimly lit motel room, staring at her phone, realizing that nobody was coming to save her. And I didn't feel bad. She tried to ruin me. She tried to steal my home, destroy my reputation, and sabotage my career. She even tried to paint me as a criminal. But in the end, she was the one who fell. And the best part? I didn't even have to fight the final battle. The law did it for me. After her arrest, she spent months tangled in legal battles, fighting lawsuits, facing fraud charges, scrambling to defend herself. But the system doesn't care for crocodile tears. Her manipulations, her lies, none of it worked anymore. She had spent her whole life playing the victim, twisting reality to make others look like villains. But now, she had run out of people to fool. The last update I got? She was completely alone. No home. No family. No money. Just the consequences of her own actions finally catching up to her. And as I sat on my couch, sipping my coffee, enjoying the quiet peace of my home, I smiled. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't guilty. I had won. The day I got the final update on my mother's downfall, I felt nothing but relief. No sadness, no guilt, just the overwhelming peace of knowing that, for the first time in my life, I was truly free. She had spent her whole existence manipulating, lying, and destroying everything in her path. But in the end, she destroyed herself. I remember sitting on my couch when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a cousin, one of the few who still kept distant tabs on my mother. Your mom just got arrested at a gas station. I stared at the text, letting the words sink in. It was over. I imagined her in handcuffs, screaming, cursing, trying to manipulate her way out, just like she always did. But this time, there was no escape. The police didn't care about her sob stories. The courts weren't swayed by her fake tears. She wasn't dealing with family members she could guilt-trip or intimidate. She was facing the law. And the law doesn't care about, but I'm your mother. After everything she did, after trying to take over my home, smear my name, steal my identity, she was finally paying the price. No more flying monkeys defending her. No more enablers making excuses. Just her. Alone. It was poetic, really. She had burned every bridge, pushed away every person who might have helped her, and now she had nowhere left to turn. For years, I had been the one to suffer. The one she hurt, manipulated, and discarded when I was no longer useful. But in the end, she was the one discarded. And I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. I put my phone down, leaned back, and took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of her anymore. For the first time, she had no power over me. And for the first time, I felt truly free. The aftermath of my mother's downfall wasn't just about justice, it was about freedom. It was about breaking a lifetime of chains, about reclaiming my peace, and about proving that no matter how deep manipulation runs, truth will always win. For years, I had lived in fear of her control. She had dictated my childhood, stolen my stability, and tried to ruin the life I built. But in the end, she was the one who fell, not because I fought dirty, not because I stooped to her level, but because she dug her own grave. All I did was hold up a mirror and let her see the monster staring back. The lesson? People like her thrive on control, but only if you let them. They will use guilt, obligation, and even fear to manipulate you. They will make you question yourself, make you feel like you owe them something just because of a biological bond. But here's the truth, family is not defined by blood. It is defined by love, respect, and mutual care. And the moment someone, even a parent, becomes toxic to your well-being, you have every right to cut them out. I spent too many years trying to earn the love of someone who was incapable of giving it. I thought if I worked harder, if I was more obedient, if I just tried a little more, she would finally see me as worthy. But the harsh truth? Some people will never change. Some people will take until you are left with nothing but exhaustion and regret. So here's my advice, don't wait for karma to handle it. Handle it yourself. Set boundaries. Enforce them. And if someone refuses to respect them, walk away and don't look back. I did. And for the first time in my life, I am free.